Welcome to Grays Harbor, Washington State Learning Standards Training. Washington State has learning standards and basic skills for both ABE and ESL in the areas of reading, writing, math, listening, and speaking. These standards help ensure that we provide quality, consistent instruction to our students. Before we get started, please be sure to have a hard copy of the standards in front of you. This is the URL. It might be easier to search for it by SBCTC Learning Standards, and it should be the first thing that pops up. There's also a link from our resource page on the college homepage. Take a few minutes to do this warm-up activity. How important is reading, writing, math, listening, or speaking in your life? When do you do these activities and why do you do these activities? And think about them in your life in general, not just in academic setting. Choose one skill area and make a few notes. You're welcome to pause the video as you work on this. Now take a few minutes to think about what do you do before, during, or after a particular activity. So for example, what do good writers do before writing, while they're writing, and after they have written something? Again, take a few minutes to make some notes. If you're watching this video with others, you can pause the video and share your ideas. These are also good activities to do with students to get them warmed up and thinking about these different skill areas. PTCC is the foundation for the learning standards. P is for purposeful. Our lessons should be meaningful to students. The lesson should also be transparent. Sometimes the purpose isn't clear to students, so we need to be sure that each lesson we teach is transparent, meaning that it's clearly stated what our goals and objectives are for the lesson so that students know why they're being taught particular information. The lessons should also be contextualized so that they can be applied to real-life settings. This helps to make the lessons meaningful. And they should be constructivist. They should be building on prior knowledge and creating scaffolding for future learning. Another way to look at the structure is we have the learning standards, followed by the dimensions of performance, which we'll discuss shortly. They're also referred to as fluency statements. Then we have the curriculum frameworks, which breaks down the standard for each level in each skill area. These influence the local curricula and then, of course, influences what happens in the classroom. As you look at the standards document, you'll see that each one includes a standard which describes the integrated process, indicators, which are criteria what students should be able to do upon finishing that particular level, and the teaching and learning objectives, which break down what needs to be addressed in the class and giving examples of how those can be taught. And then there are also the level descriptions, which are the dimensions of performance or fluency statements. And these are a holistic statement of what students should be able to do. So looking at the standard document, we're going to look at ABE Level 4, Writing. This is just convenient. It overlaps with ESL Level 6, so you'll see the same language for ESL Level 6. You see the standards stated at the top convey ideas in writing, and there are 4 components which address purpose, organization, conventions, and revision. The standard and the components are the same for all levels in both ABE and ESL. Here we have the reading standard, which is read with understanding, and the components for that. The writing we've already looked at. Math, use math to solve problems and communicate. Listening, listen actively. And speaking, speak so others can understand. You'll notice similarities between speaking and writing. Those both involve output, and similarities between reading and listening. Those both involve input. So what do level indicators do? These describe what performance of a standard looks like at completion of a particular level, and the key knowledge, skills, and strategies that learners should be able to demonstrate at that level. So the indicators are what students should be able to do upon finishing that level. The 4 key dimensions of performance, also referred to as fluency statements and level descriptors, is knowledge, fluency, independence, and ability. So knowledge is the information that students gain. Fluency is the ease with which they can perform a task. Independence refers to how independently they can perform that task, and ability is how well they can perform the task. So again, looking at our example for level 4 writing, we have the standard and components at the top, and on the left-hand column you'll see the indicators. For level 4, you have 5 indicators. So now these are specific to ABE level 4 writing, of what students should be able to do upon finishing that level. Below that, you'll see the fluency statement, which gives a holistic description of what students should be able to do upon finishing level 4. At the end of the document, you'll see a continuum of these indicators, which give you the indicators side by side for each level. These continue for several pages because they're in columns, and at the end of each column you'll see the fluency statement for each level. This is handy for anyone who teaches multi-level classes. The examples of proficient performance give examples of meaningful real-life tasks, and they provide guidance for instruction and for students to determine what they want to work on. So again, looking at our example, we have the standard and components at the top, the indicators and fluency statement on the left, and on the right-hand side you'll see ABE Level 4 examples of proficient performance. So these are examples of some activities students could be able to do upon finishing Level 4, things that they can work on achieving in Level 4. Teaching and learning objectives, or TLOs, give explicit guidance for the teaching and learning. They introduce skills and strategies, and they're organized in strands. They also are broken down into examples within each of the strands. It's important to remember you want to focus on just a few TLOs at a time, so at the very most 2 or 3 at a time, and others will be addressed indirectly. The strands for writing are planning, convention, text generation, and revision. As you continue in the document, still with ABE Level 4 writing, you'll see the planning, text generation, conventions, and revision strands broken down into A, B, C, and D. Under A, planning strands, you'll see 4A1. 4 refers to the level, A refers to the first strand, planning strand, and then there are 4 TLOs for that strand. So again, as you're teaching a lesson, you'll want to choose just 2 or 3 at the most of these TLOs. As you continue in the document, you'll also see that these strands are then broken down into examples. So you have the TLOs, again, 4A1 is convey ideas, and that's broken down into 4 examples of how you can teach and what students could be learning when addressing that TLO. Also at the end of the document, there's a continuum for the TLOs. And you'll notice that for writing, they put ESL and ABE together, so the continuum begins with ESL Level 1. You'll see an overlap of 4 levels of ABE and ESL, and it ends with ABE Level 4. The next item in the standards document that you'll find for each level are the illustrations. There are two illustrations. The first one gives an in-depth example of how a student applies knowledge and a skill that he or she has learned in real life. The second illustration is an example of how the teacher teaching that skill in class. So the first illustration is how the student applies the skill learned, and the second is the teaching. So here's level 4, illustration 1. This is from the student perspective of writing a newsletter. And illustration number 2 is from the perspective of the teacher teaching how to write a formal letter. So how do we arrive at a standards lesson? There are a variety of ways to come up with standards-based lessons. One way is to survey students to find out what they want to learn. They often know exactly what they want to learn. You can provide a list for students to choose from, and that list could be from the proficient performance examples. It could be a list of skills needed to get a GED or to get a certificate, or it could also be to have the ability to speak with a doctor without an interpreter. Students can choose from those lists. The class can vote on them if you'd like. You can also use CASAS levels for students to see what they need to exit a particular CASAS level. Speaking with students can give you an idea of what they'd like to focus on or what they may need to focus on. And of course, any teaching materials that you use can be used as the basis for a standards lesson. As you create your own lesson, you want to keep in mind the PTCC. You can create the lesson, and there is an example of a lesson plan form on the next slide. And then on the state website, there is a form for a reflection after you teach the lesson. You can go back and fill out the form and reflect on how effectively it went and what changes you may want to make. Here's the lesson plan form that I use in an ESL classroom. I mark reading, writing, listening, or speaking. The goal for students is to improve their English. And then I put in the objective for a particular lesson, what the warm-up is. I introduce the lesson. Students practice. We do an assessment, and the assessment could be formal or informal. We may have additional practice in class or for homework, and then there may be additional activities that I choose to do if I feel students need more practice or if students want more practice. And then at the end I put down what TLOs I focused on. You can approach this either way. You can write up your lesson and then go to the standards document and determine what TLOs were addressed in the lesson, or you can go to the document first and choose a couple TLOs and create a lesson around those TLOs. It's really just a matter of what's comfortable for you. Obviously, I don't do this for every lesson, but I keep in mind what TLOs I'm addressing, and that helps me make sure I'm not skipping anything that is important for student learning. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Sarah Aiken teaches ABE, Jennifer Barber teaches ESL, and Tricia McIntosh teaches ABE IBEST. Sarah and I are trained in cadre members in writing and listening and speaking, and Tricia is trained in the math cadre, and we all have received training for reading as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and good luck and good teaching.